Welcome back to the show, everybody. Today's guest is a repeat guest on this podcast. It's Jean-François Tremblay from CanLab Sciences. And so we've got one of our big rambling conversations going on here, but we kept it to a reasonable amount of time. And things that we are going to cover in this episode are the new hybrid peptide, thymosin alpha-1 LL37. We talk a little bit about semaglutide. We have a conversation about thymosin alpha-1 RGDR, which you will only find at CanLab. And Jean-François explains why it's a great peptide to include every once in a while in your regime. We talk about thymosin beta 4 and its fragments and how they interact and how to use them together and apart. And then we finish off with a conversation on dosages of synthetic bioregulators. I think this is going to be an ongoing topic of conversation. And I just think we need to keep talking about it and reinforcing to people where the information came from and why this may be so, why we just don't need to use as much as we've been led to believe. So if you get value from this episode, you know what to do. Please make sure that you share it out with your friends, your family, and your networks. And also that you leave us a 5-star review if, of course, you enjoy the episode and you believe it is worthy. I would never ask you to do otherwise. Please make sure also that you remember, and I don't think we really talk about dosages, but again, we're not endorsing the use of peptides here. We're going on with a conversation that I think is incredibly important because there's so much information that needs to be shared about these very powerful compounds. For people who do buy peptides, or if you're a practitioner, or for people who decide, who have gotten guidance and know what they want to do, you can go to canlabsciences.com and use discount code OSP. O like optimizing, S like superhuman, P like performance, OSP15, and save 15% off of your purchase. Thank you so much for being here. I completely appreciate you guys. Oh, and the last thing I wanted to let you know is if you're listening to this podcast and you're a visual person, don't forget that we also have a YouTube channel. So you could be watching all of these interviews if you're a person who prefers to see people who are talking to you instead of just listening to them. So thanks again for being here and enjoy the episode. Hey folks, just a little bit of housekeeping before we launch into the episode. Please remember that all of the information provided in these podcasts is for information purposes only. We are never offering treatments, cures, whatever for any kind of disease or medical condition. Anything you hear about here is going to be intriguing. There's some research around it, but make sure that you check with your medical provider before you go off and do any of this stuff for yourself. All right. So, enjoy the episode. And also, if you're looking to connect with me for any reason, with your comments, questions, whatever it may be, you can reach me through my website, which is natnidham.com, or you can find me on Facebook in the Optimizing Superhuman Performance group, or on MeWe in the Biohacking Superhuman Performance group. And of course, you can also follow me on Instagram, which is at Natalie Nidham. Natalie is with an H between the T and the A, the second A. So thank you so much for being here. Appreciate you guys. Enjoy the episode. And here we are again. Welcome to the podcast, Jean-François Tremblay. It is such a pleasure to have you here today.
Likewise, it's always a pleasure for me.
And me. And this one, of course, this episode, technically we've already recorded, except for the part that I forgot to hit the record button. So we left a lot of people hanging on a couple of these topics. So I'm really excited to dig deep into it with you. And so today we are going to talk about a few different topics that more than we started with. But the first thing we're going to talk about is it's not as new as it was the first time we recorded, but the hybrid peptide, LL37 and thymosin alpha-1. So this is a peptide that's relatively new on the market. To your point, there's not a ton of research on it just yet, but essentially its researchers have taken these two peptides and created a new hybrid out of the two of them. And just like the quick overview is part of the equation was reducing the cytotoxic effects of the LL37 by bringing in the thymosin alpha-1 that is more cytoprotective. And so the result, the one thing we know is that it seems to have really great anti-inflammatory benefits, I think specifically for the gut, but we don't know much more than that. So
no, it probably did retain some of the activities of both peptides, but to what degree, no studies were done yet. The only thing that was studied is, and that was the aim of making it, was to look at the anti-inflammatory in the guts, and it works amazingly well for that matter. There is no studies on that, but by now hundreds of people have used it and report back, not all of them, but many. And yeah, it works amazingly good for that.
Yeah. So actually, before we go too much further, why don't you, if you don't mind, can you talk a little bit about LL37 on its own and then thymosin alpha-1 on its own? Because maybe there's people new to the podcast who aren't as familiar with these peptides. I mean, thymosin alpha-1, if you're into peptides, it's a little bit hard to have not heard about it by now.
Yeah, LL37 is more of a, okay, LL37, we talked about that one a bit.
Yeah.
It's actually, you're naturally high on it if you have high level of vitamin D.
Yeah, so it's a downstream metabolite.
And there is no problem in the metabolic pathway down to breakdown of protein that produce LL37. It's always been known mostly for its antiviral, antimicrobial activity.
Mm-hmm.
And it's being used for that with very good. But the problem is, well, and they knew it was anti-inflammatory, but couldn't be used in high dosages for that in the guts, mm-hmm. because it is cytotoxic.
Yeah.
So on one side. On the other side, thymosin alpha-1, who is mostly known for its immune system activity, but that's not the only one. It's actually really good at the nerve regeneration, certain pathways that thymosin alpha-1 is very efficient at, but it's mostly known for its immune system regulation.
Modulation, and it's also anti-inflammatory, right?
To a point.
Yeah, yeah.
Actually, it turns out that thymosin beta 4 and thymosin alpha-1 have similar activities,
yeah,
but to much different degrees. Like thymosin beta 4 is immune system modulatory, but maybe 100 times less than thymosin alpha-1. You know, they come from the same protein, and mm-hmm. So, but anyway, so, and one of the effects of thymosin alpha-1 is the cytoprotection.
Right.
So again, it's not CanLab who did the studies or came up, you know, some people implied that. No, we just looked at studies and say, oh, looks good, we're going to make it. Mm. So some researcher, they thought that, they say, hey, let's try that. I don't know where they get those ideas from. But maybe they're into heavy microdosing. I don't know. So, so they tried it. They tried different segments. You know, when you do that kind of study, it's a lot of trials and error on different. Okay, let's take that fraction. Let's hook it up, and they ended up. That's the best one they found, and on paper, really effective. They did on mice, working good. The only thing that surprised me is at the beginning, when I did the conversion from mice to human dosage, following that, it would have been a 10 to 20 milligrams per dose. So I say, well, yeah, you know, it's going to be expensive. We made it anyway because they are a market, a medical market for that. Mm-hmm. But trying it out, some people trying it out, turns out that no, like half a milligram, bang, it worked amazingly good, you know. And we found that the effect lasts for maybe 8-9 hours. Mm-hmm. So it's for all around effects, it's basically twice a day dosage, half a milligrams, and bang, it's working. So it's a good, really good peptide.
Yeah, although I think that for people, if they decide to go on solo with this, which we're not recommending you do, if you're not working with a doctor, and especially if you have a lot of issues in the gut or with your immune system, again, like anything else, you want to test this out at a very small dose
Always.
before you jump in, because you don't know. And there's a
Not
lot,
not
there's a lot that isn't known here, guys.
not
So
so much for its effects, but if you, because we know by now there is always a small percentage of the population that may have bad reaction to a peptide, either because of the structure of it or they're immunodepressed, could be anything. But you know that when you start a new peptide or a peptide therapy in general, always start very small and to see if you basically don't react, you know, you just get the effect and then you can build up.
Yeah. So I have a question for you actually that I just thought of. So the other peptide that we know can be quite effective for gut inflammation is KPV, which a lot of people will use. Do we have a sense of how they might be a little bit different? Or I wonder if in the end, as they do more research, if we'll find out that there is some of that LL37 antimicrobial effect that gets preserved, but
sometimes it you know how funny it is, sometimes it overlaps. I diverge a bit, but generally like that. If you look at the Russian bioregulator Thymogen, 2 amino acids, well, it turns out that, and you look at the molecule of thymosin alpha 1, in thymosin alpha 1 you'll find twice that
same sequence,
the peptide sequence. So basically, yeah, thymosin alpha 1 has an immune thing, but when it breaks down, it will break down to, at one point, maybe not all of it, but part of it into thymogen, then get that thing. So at this point, it's funny. There is a few things I'm not sure about. And that started when I looked into, we'll talk a bit later about that, the fraction of thymosin alpha 1s. So for years and years, we use thymosin alpha 1. Then suddenly some research pops out and no, you can break it down.
You mean thymosin beta 4? Wait, you're talking about thymosin beta 4.
Sorry, beta 4. And each or specific fractions have specific effect. And why I'm talking about that, I'm coming to the BPC 157 taken orally. And there is a lot of people who are looking at, okay, you take it in gastro-protected capsule, so it enters the intestine without degradation and this and that. But here the thing is, nobody looked into that. But what if the actual effect of BPC 157 is not from the full molecule, but from a fraction of it, and that degradation is necessary for it to work?
Right.
You understand? That's just an idea. Who knows? The thing is, it's not, things are not so clear as we may think.
Well, and isn't it also possible that with thymosin alpha 1 having those two like thymogens embedded in the sequence, that it doesn't even need to be degraded? It's just that thymogen, that it's going to bind to the receptor for thymogen.
Yeah, yes, no, because we know that those receptors are the actual DNA. And I don't think I don't think the full T1 molecule, it won't get that far into the cell.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Actually, it would have to get broken down for it to even make it through.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, no, that was that makes sense. Okay.
But okay, just a parenthesis, close it, back to the hybrid. So basically that's it. And that's the future, is that for two reasons. One, because it is there, and two, because then pharmaceutical companies will be able to patent those hybrids because they're not naturally made. It is a good thing, actually, because then they will be in the mainstream medicine.
Yeah.
As they should.
Yeah.
Now, the only reason they're not, it's because we cannot patent them, so we suppress them.
Yeah.
But the other thing is, of course, they're going to sell them expensive, but insurance and things and that, it all fits it, a whole system where it will be available to the people. So that it gives peptides, actually, looking at it this way, a bright future.
I agree. Well, look at the GLP-1 agonist, right? Like that whole category of peptides just got blown
Okay,
out.
I think I said it in our first video. I said it in a few videos.
Yeah.
Bunch of questions. Is there a peptide to lose weight? And my answer was always, I wish. And I said, the day there is one, you'll know, because I'm going to be thinner.
Yeah.
Well,
and you're
I am
thinner.
This is it. It is working big time.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. I've used it myself, and it's like it's a drug, guys. Like the brand name is Ozempic. And if you're fortunate enough to have a doctor who will prescribe it to you under insurance, if it, what I, and we weren't going to talk about GLP, about
well, just shortly, I wanted to mention it because,
but I think, to me, what is most exciting about the GLP-1 agonist, not only is it, first of all, a complete game changer, or as Dan Stickler, it's a paradigm shift in weight loss. But on top of that, it's the metabolic benefits and the protective effects for certain organs like the heart, the brain, the lungs, the kidneys.
I know some people who take it, they don't need to lose weight. They take a small dosage.
Yeah.
For example, who just for the blood glucose control, and so they don't get those cravings. And as you said, for the organs, for the brain, they say it's good for the brain. Like, Alzheimer was called, not so often recently, but Alzheimer type 3.
Type 3 diabetes.
Sorry. Because of a glucose malfunction, absorption in the brain. So it fixes that. So no, it's the kind of product, actually, that if you use it to lose weight, you should really continue after a much smaller dosage. First, to keep the weight down, plus for all those other benefits.
No, I mean, I used it. I didn't have a lot of weight to lose, but it got me to my target. And now I'm on a very small kind of maintenance dose, just to, anyway, I may eventually titrate off completely just to see what happens. But it's because I wonder, and I mean, again, we're not going to talk about this for too long, but I wonder if once you've normalized insulin production by the pancreas in response to glucose, once you're improved the uptake of glucose by the muscle cells, once you've kind of reestablished these norms, and you regain your metabolic health and flexibility, I wonder if you could stop the peptide eventually, and you would maintain those things as long as you keep up the right nutrition, the exercise, the lifestyle,
or
right?
At least for a long time.
Yeah.
And one thing it does, I've read that somewhere, or maybe in a dream, I don't know. But that's an old thing that we knew since the 80s. The brain, the primal part, there is a set point for your body weight.
Yeah.
And again, if people remember, back in the 80s, 90s, I was working mostly with bodybuilders.
Yeah.
And you see that today. There is a set point. So let's say you weigh 150 and you train, you you up to 170. Then that's, if you keep that 170 for a few months, then your body take that 170 as your new body weight.
Mm-hmm.
So after that, even if you stop training, you won't go down. Your body will compensate by increasing fat percentage, and you will gravitate around 170. And that's why, for example, I was talking to, a few times with, I had a few podcasts with him, and right now I forgot his name. The bodybuilder, he didn't win, but classified a few times at the Olympia, guy from Toronto. Anyway, he's in 40s. He wants to be healthy. He cannot bring his weight down. because that set point is there. And back then there was a medication you could take actually that would, let's say you would, by dieting hard, bring your weight down, and then once it down, you would take that medication, but it would take like 2 years
To
to
reset.
reset it to a lower level. And it was a prolactin inhibitor that they found had that effect on the brain. But I think the Ozempic has that effect on the brain.
Yeah. So, I mean, we'll learn more as we go, but definitely there's some great research around it. And if you can talk your doc into writing your prescription for it, it's definitely worth a try. All right, let's move on. So the next peptide we were going to talk about, which is on the agenda, was thymosin alpha-1 RGDR, which is a new version of thymosin alpha-1 that has very, very precise activity or affinity for tumor cells. And so again, like guys, I'm going to keep repeating this. This is not a DIY peptide. This is not oh, I just got a diagnosis, I'm going to go get this peptide. This is something you find the research, you bring it to your medical doctor, and you sit with them and you talk about, could this be something that is appropriate for you? But this is not, again, like I think it's what you.
But it is mainstream. In Canada, I was surprised. I went to a couple of medical visits, like with my generalist and then another doctor, and they ask you always what medication do you take. So I put semaglutide, and both they say, "Oh, that's Ozempic." I say, "Yeah." I say,
you went back to Ozempic. We moved on.
Wow, sorry, but no, but fast. Oh, I thought that's the one. Yeah. No, but it's very mainstream. It's no problem. Doctor, they love to prescribe it now. And the bodybuilder, that's Ben Pakulski I was talking
Ben
about.
Pakulski. Okay, good. Great.
Okay, sorry, I got
you were lost in thought there. You were going, wait, there's something else I wanted to say. No, listen, I have a friend who was just prescribed it by her endocrinologist because she has a heart condition, and they realized that this would be very beneficial for her. But again, it's her endocrinologist with her cardiologist who got together and said, this is a good plan. So moving on, thymosin alpha-1 RGDR. And it's interesting because there's somebody in the Facebook group today who posted, oh, I normally order my TA.
Yeah, by mistake, they ordered that one. Well, no big deal.
But not from you. Is it from you or is it from someone?
Oh, yeah, I'm the only one. We're the only one selling it. So.
Okay.
And he actually wrote in private, but probably, and I answered him. But no big deal. Because this one is different. It's not a modification of TA1. It's a small addition to the sequence. Okay. That doesn't affect the effect. So what it does is it keeps all the activity of TA1, but because of that modification, we talked before the 3D thing, so it modifies a bit. So it makes it more affinity for the receptor that are involved in cancer cells.
Yeah.
So it increases the anti-cancer activity of thymosin alpha-1 by a few folds. Like really, it makes a difference. I don't remember, 10-fold something. And but like in the case of that person, if he was using it for something else, it will work the same. So nothing to worry about. And if he has a few cancer cells around, well, it's going to take care of it.
Okay. So that's we know that this is the question that's going to come from the group. Someone in the group is going to say, okay, I read that, at some moment or another, we all have cancer cells that happen in the body. Generally speaking, the good news is that your immune system can deal with them, right?
In general, yeah.
But somebody's going to say, so would it make sense for me to use this as
okay, that's like for those other cells we want to get rid of,
the senolytic cells, the senescent
cells. See, that's
senescent cells, not senolytic cells.
Not very few people talk or even know about that, but senolytic cells have a role in the body.
Yeah.
When you grow older, first before 50, you don't want to kill them. Actually, I'll tell you why. But when you grow older, then they go haywire. That's part like the signal of aging. That's one of the signal. Hey, go and destroy. So you want to get rid of the excess
Yeah.
But because it turns out that it's senescent cells, by being what they are, they send a signal to the body to make new sane cells.
Mm-hmm.
So if you kill too many, then you kill that signaling. And yeah, you won't have senescent cells, but you won't be making new sane cells either.
Yeah.
So it's really a balance. And people who do senolytic and all that, that's the tricky part. It's better to go on the lower side of dosages and everything for that one reason. We cannot measure yet levels of senolytic cells in your body. So you don't know if it's too high or not,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
if you use a senolytic, have you killed enough or too many?
Mm-hmm.
We can't measure it. So that's what that whole senolytic therapies is great as a concept. It can be applied, but very, very, very respectfully, could I say, or because of that, you don't want to kill them all. And I think if we have a few cancerous cells going around, it's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
Why? Because they actually train your immune system.
Yeah.
Like a vaccine does. Not, but by
it's
being
not in the
there,
same way, but it gives the immune
but
system the opportunity to deal with the cancer cells. So
the immune system learns how to deal with them.
Yeah.
So when it becomes more serious, it knows what to do.
Hopefully. Yeah.
So
okay. So perfect. So next on the agenda, I'm just going to keep us on the agenda so we don't end up doing a very long podcast. Well, it's not last. It's our third to last topic is thymosin beta 4, which I think, you've always said, I think for you, if you were stuck with only one peptide, you would pick thymosin beta 4. For me, it would be BPC 157 because I can't use thymosin beta 4.
So it's a very close second.
And it's a close race between those two. But thymosin beta 4, what your lab did is recognizing that there's 4 different binding sites that have very specific 4 fragments, if you will, that make up this big thymosin beta 4 peptide. Each fragment really has very specific
which we can find in your group. So I wouldn't
there's
go
a
into
post
details.
in my group. Yeah, in the guide
Very easy
section
to
of my
find
group.
and break down. What I would like to say, and that's going to be very fast, is that when you use them, maybe explain what it is. Thymosin beta 4 is like a key ring with many keys.
Right.
So one key is anti-inflammatory. One key is healing. One key is good for the heart in terms of bringing back its native state.
Right.
Makes the heart remember its native state. So you have all those keys.
And then the 4th one, is anti-fibrotic, right?
No, that's the same as the
anti-inflammatory,
and antifibrotic. But it turns out that, it's a key chain with many keys, but now we found the individual keys, so we make them separately. So if you exclusively want the anti-inflammatory effect, then you use that one key. If you want the tissue healing, then you use exclusively another key. That it gives you tools. Okay, 2 reasons why it's nice. Because, and by the way, I found that the anti-inflammatory part, that's a fragment 1 to 4, it basically dwarfs all other anti-inflammatory peptide. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But the reason is because it's so much smaller. It's only 4 amino acids instead of 43. Then per milligrams, you have 10 times more molecules. So you get, for its anti-inflammatory effect specifically, you get 10 times the punch of thymosin beta 4 if you use the same milligram dosage as TB4. You understand? And for the healing one, that's the fragment 1723, it's an 8-to-1 ratio. So specifically for healing, then you get 8 times the punch. You use 1 milligrams of the fragment, it's like using 8 milligrams of thymosin beta 4 for that specific effect. Now, me, I like to balance things, so I don't think you should go exclusively using one of the key, unless like, okay, let's say I have a back pain, I'll take 1 or 2 milligrams of the inflammatory one, and bang, and pain, inflammation is gone. So that's very on the spot, not as a therapy. So me, I like to see it as peptides you can use to spike an effect. So you use as a base the thymosin beta 4. And let's say you're at the beginning, it's an injury. So at the beginning, inflammation is really high. So you can, for maybe 3 days, spike the anti-inflammatory effect. So when the inflammation is down after a few days, then you could spike the tissue healing effect. And you play with that. But I would always keep the thymosin beta 4 as a base, then spike some effects as needed, so to say. The only caveat to that you need to know is that those fragments, because they're much smaller, they fit better in their receptors, so they will displace thymosin beta 4. So if you use the anti-inflammatory, at the same time you use thymosin beta 4, so you'll get all the effects of thymosin beta 4 minus the anti-inflammation, because the fragment will have displaced in those receptors the TB4. So the way around it, it's easy. After 12 hours, there is no thymosin beta 4 left. It's all degraded. So let's say if you're to use 2, like a fragment and TB, you take TB4 in the morning, and then the fragment you want 12 hours at night. So you have that 12 hours gap in between, and then you get the most out of everything. So basically this is it. And by the way, that fragment, Kavinson last year came out with kind of a review articles on Bioregulator, came up with a few new ones, very interesting, most of them related to stem cells. But frag 1,4 of thymosin beta 4 is on his list.
Oh, you're kidding. As a bioregulator.
He believes it is a bioregulator.
And that's the
small enough to integrate itself in the DNA. And they do computer thing to see if it fits somewhere. So probably, he found that somehow it fits into the DNA. I have to go through the research backing up that thing. I didn't look into it yet, but it was just makes sense just by the size. Well,
so that's interesting, right? Because based on what you said about the thymosin alpha-1 earlier, that has the thymogen fragments embedded into the thymosin alpha-1. So it's similar here within the TB4.
But we break it down. So there you go. And that would make sense to the fact that there is that researcher that did many research on the heart tissue and thymosin beta 4. And last year too, he came up with kind of a review of his work and what was done on thymosin beta 4. But the title of the article is something about thymosin beta 4, a peptide that makes the heart cells remember its native state.
Yeah, you sent me that study. I'll put it in the show
I
notes.
sent it to you.
Yeah.
And basically that's what bioregulator does.
Yeah.
But it turns out that it's probably those smaller fraction, because you have the 40-43, which is 4 amino acids. So would fit in the to enter the DNA sequence. Those two. But that other one, that second one, 40-43, has an effect on the heart. So, it's
interesting.
With time, it makes more and more sense.
Yeah.
And it turns out that that Russian guy, again, I've been saying it for years. He really put his finger on something.
Yeah, no, he definitely figured it out. So not that in terms of very general dosage guidelines, would it be and we're not giving dosages for any particular condition here, but the TB4 is the one that you can use at, let's say, I mean, you can use it daily at 1 milligram a day or 2, or you can use it in bigger dosages every other day. It has more flexibility, but if you're shaking.
No. But dosages, first, I'm a proponent of high dosages.
Well, for sure. And that's not.
But again, I want to repeat, it's not out of my hat or, no, you read the research, and if you go beyond the abstract and read the article and then look at the dosages that was given, convert it to human dosages, and I even wrote a little thing somewhere in the group, you'll find out that 20, 30, 40, 50 milligrams a day of thymosin beta 4 was needed for what happened to happen.
But that's for therapeutic benefits.
Of course.
Yeah,
and like very serious cases.
Yeah.
Or you look at ALS or things like that.
So we're talking about a whole other category.
You need much higher dosages. But again, I wrote about that in your group so people can find it. But it's not out of my hat. I came up with those dosages. It's all there. Just look it up. And actually, that article I wrote, I put the article, some articles, and the conversion. I did all the calculation, and I said, okay, that's how much they gave to the mice, converted to human. That's what you get. Come on, that's not 1 milligrams, that's 20 milligrams, that's 30 milligrams.
So that's on the TB4, but on the fragments, you were saying that
that's another thing. It can make a therapy much more affordable, because now you're talking roughly for the two main ones, a 10-fold difference. So if you know that it's that fragment that has the healing effect on that, what you want, then when they were using 50 milligrams of thymosin beta 4, now roughly you'll need 5 milligrams. You bring down, and the fragments are a bit cheaper. Again, people, they say, yeah, but it's much smaller. How come it's less, but a lot more of. So, the weight is the same.
Got it.
So that's why it's about the same price. But they are a bit cheaper because, yes, it's a bit less work in the actual synthesis. So, it makes it that much more affordable. And I've been doing it now for the last year or so in those specific therapies with ALS, with MS, with Parkinson. Then I go with the fractions, and now it's not like for thousands of dollars a week, it's hundreds.
Yeah, makes a difference.
Still, a huge difference.
For sure. Okay. Well, seeing as we're on the topic of dosing, I do want to
that's purely educational.
Yeah, no, look, we're not giving anybody dosages here. We're just saying. But on the bioregulator front.
That was the last topic.
No, it's the second to last. We have one more after that.
Okay, well, I did in the previous podcast, I did my personal miracle pump.
Episode 54 of this podcast. If you go back to that episode, that's the first time we talk about when Jean-Francois started actually doing that thing that very few of us do. And that's going back to the original research. Because what happens so often is one or two or three people, they interpret studies, they come out with, this is what they did in the study, this is how they got the results, and then everybody just follows suit. There's very few people that will take the time, frankly, to go back to that original piece of work to check. And it just so happens that Jean-Francois must have had some extra time on his hands one day and decided
nothing good on Netflix that week.
Yeah, exactly. There was just nothing going on. And so he went back to the original documents or the original studies that Kevinson had published talking about the synthetic bioregulators. And Jean-Francois had a great big aha, going,
Well, not
holy
not
crap.
me actually, and I gave the
Was it you
credit
or was
to some guy
was
that
it not you? I thought it was you.
no, and I gave the credit back then to some. It's a German guy. Uh, I don't
Okay,
know his
episode
real name, but
54. Yeah.
anyway, people who are on Reddit and all that, they'll know what I'm talking about. Well, he's right, and I looked and I say, "Fuck yeah, he's right." So basically, that's what happened. Many years ago, when they started to study bioregulators, they only had the abstracts, like of the glands or tissues. And they normalized those to 10 milligrams. That you can still buy them. Thymalin,
Yeah.
it's not a peptide. It's an abstract of the thymus.
Oh, an extract.
An extract, sorry,
Yeah.
of the thymus. Now, there was an extract of the pineal gland that is called epitalon.
Mm-hmm.
Then once they found it works and they did studies on them, they go, okay, let's give 10 milligrams a day of the extract for 10 days. And bang, we got those results. And meanwhile, somebody somewhere in Russia, they say, okay, let's find out which one is the active peptide in the extract. And they found out it is epitalamin.
Correct. Yeah.
In thymalin, for the thymus, the active peptide is thymogen. Thymogen.
Yeah.
So now, but people, they read, and I felt into that. I thought epitalon, epitalamin was the same thing. It is not. So you're talking in terms of efficacy, a 1 to 100 difference. So when, and there are studies showing it, and even it's clearly written down. If you were to use epitalon, the extract, you would use 10 milligrams a day. If you were to use the peptide synthetic, like the one we make, we still call it epitalon because otherwise people will be like
so confused,
amazingly confused. If you use the synthetic pure peptide, you need 0.1 milligram a day to get that same effect that they got from those studies. So now, and we made the 20 milligram vials before I realized that, just because people, it was, I don't know, popular demand, we made 20 milligram. It wasn't driven by that fact yet. But it turns out that, yeah, it makes it much more practical. And you got actually two, and it's a bit, 0.1 is what you need. But even for me, it's hard to jump into. So practically, and at the price it is now, I like to be kind of conservative with it, and you cannot take too much and you actually get some more benefits. It's a little therapeutic at the same time. So I like to suggest now 1 milligram a day for 10 days. So, or you can do 1 milligram a day for 20 days if you want to use up the whole vial. But based on, well, those podcasts with you did, those 2 ones on the bioregulators, where there's a protocol where you take the first month, you take for 20 days, then every month for 10 days. I love that protocol. So you can do that easily. You know, you do 20 days with a vial, then every month, like from the 1st to the 10th, you do 1 milligram a day. That vial will last you 2 months. And it's very, you know, for me to admit that, it's very counter business, so to say, because now I'm selling like 10 times less, but it's okay. You know, it's good for people. And now all those bioregulators, it makes the therapies very affordable. Not only to use the immune and the epitalon, but you can throw in 4 or 6 more to have something really more complete. and then have a great year-round therapy with all of them if you want, and it's going to be cheaper than it was ever.
Yeah. And, you know, again, like, let's go back to this. It's a little bit like thymosin beta 4 with that little fragment that may or may not be a bioregulator, thymosin alpha 1 that has embedded in it the bioregulator sequence. And here you have the extract of the gland that has within it the bioregulator sequence that's now been isolated. So you just don't need as much because you don't have all that other stuff around. So
yeah. Just to finish again, if people they say, no, but now if I take 10, it's overdosing. No, listen, 10 milligrams of the pure was used for decades, and nothing happened. So don't worry if you go now that the known dosage is 0.1, and if you take 1 milligram, it's going to be totally safe, because for literally 2 decades we used 10 milligrams,
which is 100. What is it? 100, 1,000 times? Like, it's crazy.
100 times,
100 times the dose.
What was needed.
Yeah. Okay. So that, you know, just to bring back the bioregulator dosing discussion, I think it's important to talk about that. And finally, the last thing we're going to talk about today is, this is a question that comes up a lot in the group, and it's very controversial. And it is, if I mix more than one peptide in one vial or in one syringe, there are still people out there saying, no, you can't do that, because you're going to get, interaction between the peptides, and they're going to rearrange the sequences, and then you don't know what you have. You have some kind of Frankenstein. Okay.
Peptide. I'm going to make that one very short and sweet. Peptides don't have polarities. You don't have a peptide with a plus hanging somewhere or a minus. That would make them interact somewhere at one point. They don't. So they cannot, even if they wanted, they cannot interact between themselves. You can mix. Last time I took 17 bioregulators in one shot. And in a 10 ml.
That sounds unpleasant.
Well, it's a bit, stinks a bit.
Yeah.
But, I was traveling, so I say, well, and so every day it was like, okay. And no problem, they don't mix. And that's what I've been saying for a long time. But after having conversation with a couple of, my biochemist here and a biochemist in Marseille in France, it turns out that, yes, they can interact in some instances. And that instance is if you're working with poor quality peptides, then part of that's not an impurity, but part of it wasn't that well made. Then you may find charges on the peptides or on the byproduct that are floating around that were not well filtered. And then you could see interactions.
Okay.
Hence the importance of having quality peptides, the source, everything. And just to add, so if there are people around saying that they do interact because they've seen it, well, that's probably because they were using poor quality peptides.
Whether they knew it or not. Yeah. So it's all in the synthesis, the proper synthesis of the molecule. Okay. Well, I think that's a good point to end on. And I think, it's always worth reminding people that, it's always so tempting to people to say, I found a supplier that sells it for a fraction. And, I think that in as much as we're, again, not recommending that anybody go out and do this stuff unsupervised without medical oversight and talking to your physician, you probably should never do that. But know that it is so important to know, like, talk about a blind item, right? Like, you get this tiny little itty bitty vial with a little teeny bit of powder in there. Like, there's no way of knowing what's in that vial unless you're going to spend hundreds of dollars to send it to a lab and have it analyzed. Which, you know what, if you want to buy the $6 vial from wherever and you want to go to the trouble of doing that, then knock yourself out. But just understanding that the consequences of not knowing exactly what you're using, frankly, are not known.
And that's the human mind, because the same people won't have trouble buying those cheap peptides. Many of them will be in the same crowd that anti-vaccines, not the new ones, not the COVID, before, because they found there are traces of aluminum, right? But you're against that because against one shot given in your lifetime with a minute amount of aluminum, and you acknowledge that could be damageful, right? But then you turn around and you buy another product which will shoot at much higher dosage in all aspects, days after days. And that's not a problem because it's cheaper. So, think about that.
Yeah. You got to be consistent in your thinking a little bit. So anyway, so I think that, and it's not to scare people, but just know who you're dealing with and be confident that they not only will know what they're doing, but because I don't for 1 minute think people don't know what they're doing. It's a question of whether they've got all the right measures in place and they're checking, double checking, and triple checking their work to make sure that what ends up in that vial is what's supposed to be there and nothing more and nothing less. So is there anything else that you'd like to add, sir?
No. I'm very thankful for, my being able to participate on your Facebook group and all that. So I'm learning stuff there too. Don't think that I just I read every day and I say, oh, look at this. Well, and I have no problem, you saw giving credit where credit is due. That guy is just, I don't know his name. Some people, he started a group in Europe where they test local.
You know what? I'll find the name. We'll find the name and we'll put it in the show notes. We'll give him
credit.
I don't think that's his.
No. It is in Germany.
Okay.
Of course, on Reddit, and I asked him, no. He said, because before I came out, I said, look, you're the one who mentioned it, and I want to quote you, and he said, no, don't worry about it. But he did. So even if his real name doesn't pop out, some people will know. He's the one. It is not the first one, because it's funny because there are other people in groups that, there is the epitalon group and all that.
Right.
And you would see sometimes they would raise the question that, but
get slammed down.
No, not at all. But they were not so sure, it's like almost a religion. No, 10 milligrams. That it was, maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah. Well, they didn't have the confidence.
Confidence. But hey, they were right.
Yeah.
Straight up.
Well, and I think it's a good place to end is, don't be afraid to question. Yeah. Like at the end of the day, this is science and it's new science and it's, and I think that, you're grateful to be in the group to learn. We're grateful in the group to have you. And I think that what, especially in an area like this, where there's so much that's unknown, where we learn a lot from is from each other and from being open to the experiences that other people have. And, I learned very early in the game in that group that I never say never. Like people,
because when I start, sometimes it doesn't show, but some people will ask a question.
Yeah.
And it's going to make sometimes a day or two to answer because I don't know.
Yeah.
So it forces me to look it up, do the research, and then I give the answer. So hopefully I give the right answer, but at the same time, that's why I say I'm learning because, hey, good question. I don't know. So except it's not direct. So I don't go through that phase where I say, I don't know. I just 2 days after I come up with the right answer.
I think, we all have to be willing to take a step back and say, like I will either say, I don't know, or I'll do the research. And if I can't find it, I'll come back and say, I don't know. And try to find someone who does. Yeah. All right, Jean-François. Well, thank you so much. I would ask you to tell people where they can find you, but I don't think that's a good idea because you're a busy guy. You're running around all the time. We were recording this on a Saturday because you're going to be traveling overseas again.
Last week, I was an hour away from the Russian border.
Yeah.
No, in other circumstances, I would have crossed. I was like 6 hours from Kevinson's place by car.
Yeah.
But this time I said, oh, okay.
Maybe not a good idea. Yeah. So I'm not sure you would have been able to cross that border. So be that as it may, I don't know, definitely in the group, in the Optimizing Superhuman Performance group, you can often find Jean-François there when he's available. He's not always around to answer questions, but he does his best.
But many times what I do is like, let's say you give an answer or somebody else give an answer, and yeah, this is it. Yeah. I won't jump in. I will put a like.
You put a like on it,
like, so you know that I saw it and it's all good.
We need to get
for people who like value my expertise.
Well, I think it's almost like we need to get a little certified by JFT. Little badge.
Yeah, like the
CanLab heart. So anyway, so if you're a practitioner or medical doctor and you do want to access some of CanLab's product, you're not alone. You would be able to go to cablabsciences.com and we do have a group discount code for the group. Which is OSP15. But other than that, everybody else, guys, and we can always point you to different practitioners if you need it. Like it's now a growing list of medical doctors and practitioners who are working with these peptides. So it's an exciting time and it's an exciting field. So thank you so much for being here, Jean-François. Have an amazing rest of the day, and always a pleasure to have you.
Likewise.